The camera never blinks. It never looks away. It never feels fear, panic, or mercy. In a quiet corner of an ordinary city, a single CCTV camera recorded something no one was supposed to see in real time. No screams, no dramatic music, no warning. Just a few minutes of silence that would later echo louder than any confession. What you are about to hear is the story of a cold-blooded murder, captured without emotion, without sound, and without a chance to stop it. It was a routine night, the kind people forget as soon as it passes. The streetlights hummed softly, casting long shadows across empty sidewalks. A small convenience store sat at the edge of a residential block, its glass windows reflecting the glow of passing cars. Inside, the victim was working alone, finishing the last hour of a long shift. The camera mounted near the ceiling had been there for years, recording thousands of uneventful nights. This night, however, would be different. At 11:47 p.m., a figure appeared at the edge of the frame. The person moved slowly, deliberately, as if fully aware of the camera's presence. Their face was partially obscured by a hood, their posture calm, almost casual. There was no rush, no visible anger. This was not a crime of sudden emotion. This was something planned. The victim noticed the customer and offered a polite nod, a reflex built from years of routine. The footage shows a brief exchange, likely ordinary words about prices or payment. Nothing seemed out of place. But what the camera captured next would later freeze investigators in disbelief. The suspect reached into a pocket, not hurriedly, not nervously. The movement was smooth, controlled. In a matter of seconds, the weapon was revealed. There was no struggle, no dramatic reaction. The victim barely had time to process what was happening. The suspect stepped forward, raised their arm, and fired. The camera recorded the victim collapsing behind the counter, the body hitting the floor in a way that suggested shock rather than resistance. The entire act took less than 10 seconds. Silence filled the frame. The suspect stood there for a moment, looking down as if confirming the outcome. No words were spoken. No panic followed. The camera showed the suspect calmly turning away, walking out of the store, and disappearing into the darkness beyond the glass doors. The automatic door slid shut, sealing the scene like a final punctuation mark. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Cars drove by outside, unaware that a life had ended just steps away. Inside the store, the camera continued recording, indifferent and unwavering. It was this silence, this lack of chaos, that made the footage so disturbing to those who would later review it. When the body was discovered, the shock spread quickly. Police arrived, securing the scene, while detectives scanned every inch of the store. There were no signs of a struggle, no robbery in progress, no obvious motive. Cash remained in the register. Shelves were untouched. This was not about money. Investigators turned to the CCTV footage almost immediately. As they watched the clip, frame by frame, a chilling pattern emerged. The suspect knew exactly where the camera was. They never looked directly at it, but their movements suggested awareness. They stayed within blind spots whenever possible, and kept their face partially hidden. This was not accidental. The video was sent to forensic analysts, who enhanced the footage, sharpening outlines, slowing down movements, searching for any identifying detail. A logo on a sleeve, a unique pair of shoes, the way the suspect walked. Every detail mattered. Meanwhile, the victim's life began to unfold through interviews. Friends described a quiet, dependable person, a routine job, no known enemies, no recent conflicts. Family members struggled to understand why anyone would want them dead. The randomness of it all made the loss even heavier. As the investigation deepened, detectives considered the possibility of a targeted killing. Someone who knew the victim's schedule, someone who knew they would be alone, someone patient enough to wait for the right moment. The absence of theft suggested a personal motive, but nothing in the victim's life pointed clearly in that direction. Then came the first break. A witness reported seeing a person matching the suspect's description, lingering nearby earlier that evening. Another camera, several blocks away, captured a similar figure, walking in the same direction shortly before the murder. The timeline began to take shape. The suspect had been circling the area, waiting, Police released still images from the CCTV footage to the public. The images spread quickly, shared across news outlets and social media. The grainy pictures showed a hooded figure, frozen in time. Moments before the act, tips began to pour in, some useful, many not. But one tip stood out. A caller recognized the shoes. They were distinctive, uncommon, and recently purchased. Investigators followed the lead to a local store, then to transaction records, then to a name, a real person, a possible suspect. For the first time, the figure in the footage began to feel human, not just a shadow. As detectives closed in, they discovered a troubling detail. The suspect had a prior connection to the victim, one that seemed minor on the surface, but carried deeper resentment beneath it. A disagreement, a perceived betrayal, something small that had grown silently over time. The camera had captured the end of that resentment, but not its beginning. By the time police moved to make an arrest, they knew this was not a crime driven by chaos or desperation. It was driven by decision, by choice. The suspect had walked into that store knowing exactly what they intended to do, and the camera had watched it all unfold, without judgment. But the story was far from over. What investigators would uncover next would reveal just how thin the line is between ordinary life and irreversible action, and how a few seconds of silent footage could speak louder than any witness ever could. The arrest happened quietly, just like the crime itself. No chase, no resistance. The suspect was taken into custody at their residence, a place that looked painfully ordinary. Inside, there were no obvious signs of violence, no dramatic evidence laid out in plain sight. It was the kind of home that blended into any neighborhood, reinforcing the unsettling truth that extreme acts can come from unremarkable places. During interrogation, the suspect remained calm, almost detached. Investigators noted the absence of visible remorse, but also the absence of panic. It was as if the outcome had already been accepted. When presented with the CCTV footage, the suspect did not look away. They watched in silence, eyes fixed on the screen, reliving every step. At first, there was denial, then deflection. Finally, fragments of truth began to surface. The motive, once uncovered, shocked even seasoned detectives. It was not fueled by greed or self-defense. It was rooted in fixation, a belief that a past interaction had caused irreversible damage to the suspect's life. What the victim saw as minor or forgettable had become, in the suspect's mind, a defining moment. Over time, that belief hardened into justification. The suspect described planning the act with chilling clarity, choosing the time, observing routines, studying the environment, even accounting for the camera. The intention was never to escape completely, but to complete the act. Everything after that in their mind was secondary. For prosecutors, the CCTV footage became the backbone of the case. Unlike witness testimony, it did not forget or exaggerate. It showed the sequence exactly as it happened. The calm entry, the deliberate movement, the single, fatal action. Jurors would later describe the experience of watching the footage as deeply unsettling, not because of graphic detail but because of how quiet it was. The trial attracted widespread attention. Courtrooms were filled with observers trying to understand how such a controlled act of violence could occur without immediate warning signs. Experts were called to explain behavior patterns, fixation, and how unresolved grievances can escalate when left unchecked. The defense argued emotional distress. They spoke of isolation, pressure, and distorted thinking. But the prosecution returned again and again to the footage, to the lack of hesitation, to the absence of provocation in those final moments. The camera showed no threat, no argument, no struggle, only action. When the verdict was delivered, there was no outburst. The suspect showed little reaction, as if the conclusion had been written long before the trial began. Sentencing followed, and with it, a sense of finality that felt incomplete. A life had been lost, another permanently altered, and no amount of legal resolution could restore what was taken. For the victim's family, the footage was both a curse and a truth. They chose to watch it once, seeking answers that words could not provide. What they saw haunted them, but it also erased doubt. There was no mystery left about what happened in those final seconds. In the months that followed, the case sparked conversations about surveillance, prevention, and awareness. CCTV cameras are often seen as passive tools. But in this case, one became the most reliable witness. It did not stop the crime, but it ensured that the truth could not be erased. The store reopened eventually. The counter was replaced. The floor was redone. To most customers, it became just another stop along the road. But the camera remained, mounted in the same place, quietly recording every moment. Watching, waiting, remembering. Crimes like this challenge the idea that violence is always loud or chaotic. Sometimes it arrives calmly, disguised as normalcy. Sometimes it unfolds in silence, witnessed only by an unblinking lens. The footage from that night continues to be studied, not for sensationalism, but for understanding. Each frame serves as a reminder that the absence of noise does not mean the absence of danger. That intent can hide behind ordinary movements, and that the smallest decisions, when fueled by unchecked obsession, can lead to irreversible consequences. The camera did not save a life that night, but it gave a voice to the truth. In the end, it was not emotion, testimony, or speculation that defined what happened. It was a few silent minutes of video, preserved forever, showing exactly how quickly everything can change. And long after the courtroom lights dimmed and the headlines faded, the footage remained, a quiet, chilling record of a moment when time did not pause, when no warning was given, and when silence itself became the loudest witness of all.